Hey everyone, I just got done recording this video on if statements. It's a little long. It's going to be broken up into 13 tips, but across 2 videos. So to kick this video off, I'm just going to give you a little bit of taste, a spoiler alert of what to look forward to, and then we'll dive into the video. If you take a look at this chart, we are going to build this together. We are going to use 2 different calculations, 2 different sets of years, combine them together into a single chart. I'm back, and in this how-to lesson, we are talking about how to work with if statements in Tableau. That's right, if statements. And I've got like 13 tips. We'll see how it goes. We might have a few extra here, there. We'll just see how it goes. But 13 tips of how to use if statements. We're going to start by just showing the basic structure of an if statement. I'm just going to start by building. Actually, I'm just going to edit a calculation I already built. It's pre-baked. I'm just going to open it up and let's take a look at what it says. And you'll notice right away, if you use Excel regularly, you'd usually use an if statement and then have parentheses. We don't have parentheses in this example. Every if statement kind of is broken into these 4 components. First is your if, which you're going to provide some logical statement where you're going to compare 2 things to each other. So we're either going to, in this case, we're saying, give me the year of the order of date and make sure it's equal to 2019. And I could put any, I could say like greater than or equal to, less than or equal to or less than. And I can use this to say not 2019, or I can do the exclamation and equal sign to also say anything but 2019. But anyway, in this example, I'm just returning 2019 sales. And then the next, and I know that because in the next part I'm saying if this statement is true, if the year is 2019, then give me sales, else return, if it's not true, 0. And then for every if statement, we're also going to have an end statement. So you'll notice right here, we have our if statement and it always ends with an end. If I don't have the end, I get an error and Tableau says, hey, I expected an end statement. So that's the basic structure of the if statement. I'm just going to actually Control Z that. Now if I just click and drag that value out onto rows, excuse me, let me try that again. Click and drag that value out onto rows. You'll see that my data only shows up for 2019. So it's working perfectly here, just how we would expect it to be, only 2019 values. And I can emphasize that even more by just taking order date, and it's going to default to year on text, and I just have it broken out by year, and you'll see only 2019 has values. The rest, if I highlight those values, are all 0, exactly what we would expect. Just want to go through that again, creating another calculated field. This time I want to break out my 2019 sales on whether they were profitable, if my sales were profitable, or actually it's the products themselves, the individual sales of the individual items. Were they profitable or were they not profitable? So I'm just going to call this profit TF. And I've already created it, so I'm going to add a little space after it. You don't need to do that. That's just for me here. But I'm going to say, starting again with if, and then I'm going to type out profit. And I'm going to use a comparison to say it's greater than 0 to make it profitable. So if it is profitable, then let's give it the label of profitable, else not profitable. And I can spell today, end. That's right. One thing I want to point out here is I have an error. I've already created that field, so just add another space, solves everything. You'll notice that I have a string here in quotes for profitable and another string here in the else statement. My then and else statements always need to match with the type that are coming out of it. I'm just going to stop there and say this is how we do this. We could put in measures, dimensions, whatever we want here. As long as they're consistent across the 2, we're in great shape. So I'm just going to hit OK. And now if I bring this out onto I'm actually going to put this out in color. You'll see I'm now broken out by profitable, these orange values, and not profitable, these red values. And let's go on to the next tip. So tip number 1 out of the way. Let's do tip number 2. And I want to start with this line chart. This line chart shows profit ratio by month. We're breaking down profit ratio. What exactly is that? If we go look at that calculation and edit it, you'll see that it's the sum of profit divided by the sum of sales. And this is good to know because it's an aggregate. We're summing up a bunch of row level information. In this case, on this visualization, it's by month and by category. And what I want to do is show you how to embed an aggregate inside an if statement. We'll start by creating a new calculated field. And I'm just going to call this, let's say for this example, by the way, we just want to return furniture with our if statement. So we're just going to say, let's show profit ratio, but we want to also show, like I said, by furniture. So how do we do this? Well, we could say if, and actually this is, I'm just going to say it right away. This is not how I would do it, but I want to show you how to do it just in case it ever did come up. And later on, I'll actually show you the better way to do it. But this is how a lot of people do it, and I at least want to show you. So what I'm just going to do is say if category is equal to furniture, then let's return the profit ratio. And else we'll return a 0, and I'll do end. So if end, and you'll notice I get an error. And what is this error? Well, Tableau says I cannot mix aggregates with non-aggregate comparisons with my if statement. What's happening here is category is a row level value. It's in every row. We're not summing those values up or aggregating them. We're keeping them within the data at the level they are as a dimension. And then here, profit ratio is an aggregate. How can we fix this? Well, if we're working with an if statement, it has to either be all row level or all aggregate. It can't be both. So we would have to either make this row level. So I could, if I just say change it to 1, or if I just change this to sales, it works fine. And the Tableau likes it, it's valid. But when we're working with profit ratio, we need to make the if statement also an aggregate. And we can do that using the ATTR function. The ATTR function is very straightforward. All it does is it looks on the visualization, and it's going to look for category. And if there's more than one category in a particular mark, so in this mark, if there was more than one, it would return a star. It kind of says that right here in the directions. If there is just a single category on a mark, in this case technology, it's going to return the regular value. So this is a way to take a dimension and turn it into an aggregation. It's an attribute. I'm just going to hit OK here. And now if you notice, I'm just going to take profit ratio furniture, click and drag, and replace profit ratio in rows. And what you'll see is that furniture, that blue line, is going to stay where it is, and all those other lines for office supplies and technology are going to move to 0. And when I place it there, sure enough, just as I said, profit ratio showing up on that value. That's my second tip. For my third tip, we're going to use this line chart. It's basically sales by year for each month. So this blue line is 2016, the orange line is 2017, the red line is 2018, and the teal line is 2019. And what I want to do here is I want to be able to put the year in the first month in January of each year. So January 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. In January, I just want to put the year of 2019 there. I don't want to put it January, just 2019. And then for every subsequent month throughout the year, I want to just put the first letter of that month. So to do that, we just need to create a new calculation. I'm just going to call this month abbrev. And it seems like this should be pretty straightforward. I could use an if statement. I could say if month of year, of order date is equal to 1, and month, if we take a look, just returns the integer value. So I could just say if the month is 1, then let's return the year of the order date. And then for all the other parts, I'm just going to say left, which is going to give me the leftmost character of the date name, which is going to give me the actual name. And then inside, I'm going to say month order date. So if we're just taking a look at this, the inside says, give me the name of the month from order date, and then give me the leftmost character. And I just need to specify how many characters with a comma and then 1. So we're going to say all other months. Let's return just the first character. And then the beginning, that first January, let's get the actual year. And I'm going to type in end. And as I do that, Tableau, it's not going to like it. It doesn't like it because what we have here, I did mention this earlier, is that we have a string value and we have an integer value. And if we're going to work with the if statement, our then and else have to be of the same value. So how can we fix this? Well, we can just type out str, which converts that year integer into a string. And that makes this calculation valid. So now we can use this calculation as is. So let's just go ahead and find state abbrev, and we'll just place that on label, and it did not work. Interesting. That's because I didn't want state abbreviation. I wanted month abbreviation. So let's try that again. I'm just going to bring that out. Oh, and you'll notice Tableau doesn't appear to like this. That's because it's matching all the M's. So for March and May and April and August and June and July, it's matching those values. We just need to specify a path, or what we can do is actually just turn this month abbreviation into an attribute, and it fixes it as well. So that's it. The big takeaway from tip number 3 is make sure the then and the if statement are of the same data type. If you don't, it's not going to work. Tip number 3, done. Tip number 4. I'm going to show you how you can ignore the else statement when you don't want it. In this data, you already see sales for year and segment. Sometimes maybe we just want to return the home office sales. How can we do that? We can use the if statement. Let's just type out sales, and then we'll call it home office for the name. And I'm just going to say if segment is equal to home office, then let's return the sales. And if it's not, let's say 0. And I'm just going to type end. If I hit apply and I bring this calculation out of my view, you'll notice, sure enough, the sales come in for home office, and then the other segments have zeros. Well, if you didn't really want zeros to show up, you wanted sort of blanks to show up, you could just say else null. This is the one exception that you can make. You can always, before I said you'd have to have numeric values with numeric values, strings with strings, dates with dates. Well, you can actually include null in either the then or the else statement with any combination. So I could say here, sales, else null, and if I hit apply, you'll notice instead of having zeros, they're blanks, which might be what you're looking for in the end, is that you don't want zeros, you just want blank values, or nothing to show up. Well, you actually don't need the else statement. Tableau will know that if you don't have an else statement, it actually is just going to give you null values. So that's my that's my 4th tip, is that sometimes we just don't need the else statement, and let's not include it because we don't need it. That said, let's go into number 5. All right, tip number 5. Let's talk a little bit more about those zeros and nulls. When should you use them? When should you not use them? Well, I almost never fill in with zeros. I just don't have a use for it, and I'll show you why. Let's imagine we're putting together this visualization, and we're going to want to just show, again, home office values. We want to put those side by side with the average discount. So I want to see these 16s for each year, 16, 16, 15, and 16, and I want to put those side by side with just home office. How can I do that on a single visualization? Well, I can embed home office in using an if statement to build out sort of this embedded filter. So I can just say, all right, let's give us the discount by home office. And again, we just type out if the segment is home office, then let's return discount. And I'm going to just say end. And I already have created this calculation once before, so I'll just add a space. Again, my little trick. I'm going to hit OK. And now let's just take this value. I've already created, I've actually formatted it so this works. So I'm just going to double click and bring that value out onto the view. And you'll notice that when I do this with the null values as is, I get home office to return the same value. In fact, we could just pull segment off of here. And we could say, let's put measure values up here, and then I'll fit the width. So you'll see discount showing up correctly and home office showing up correctly. But what would happen if I would have put zeros in there? So let's go edit this once and just say, instead of not having nulls, if we would have said else 0, what you'll notice is because we're taking the average, it pushes down the true average in my data set. Instead of I'm about 13, I'm getting 2s and 3s because I'm forcing it down with zeros in the other segments of my business. So I'm just gonna get rid of this and hit OK and get our original values back. There they are. So there we have side by side with measure names, the average discount and the average discount for home office. That's tip number 5. Tip number 6. I want to talk about the and, or, and not functionality. We're doing a lot of comparisons every time we're using an if statement, but sometimes we need to make multiple comparisons in our data, in our calculations. How are we going to do that? Well, we'd use the and, or, not function. So let's just do one of these. And how we would specify it is that we would say if, and we would have some sort of argument, our first argument in the data, our first comparison. And what I want to do is say if the profit ratio, let's try that again, if the profit ratio is greater than 0, then let's say important, else not important, and this is going to give us our first calculation of, let me just name this, profitable plus question mark. We're just going to hit apply, and let's go find that profitable calculation. And when I bring this out on my color, you'll notice my not important values are below 0. Let's just change this color, by the way. There we go. So our not important values are gray and our important values are blue. That's the first part. We already knew this, but what happens when we want to have a second argument? Well, we're going to use an and or an or statement to add on to this. So if I use and, if we think about a Venn diagram, it has to be in both of these. It has to be both profitable and whatever my second argument is. In this case, I have this parameter and a parameter action on my visualization. So when I click on a value, you'll notice I'm going to update this parameter. If I go over here, you'll see it says segment equals segment consumer. If I click on it, it changes my segment parameter over here. I want that to actually update the color as I go. So I can just say segment equals segment parameter. So it needs to be profitable and in this segment. And you'll notice Tableau, again, doesn't like this because I'm mixing aggregates, that profit ratio, with a non-aggregate, which is this value. Again, we can just use ATTR and wrap it and then hit apply. And now you'll see only values that are consumer and positive profit ratio are showing up. And if I were to click on this, I could change it to home office and update the values as well. So it's important to remember that you need to have separate arguments. I can't say profit ratio is greater than 0 and 1 and less than 1. That doesn't work. I would actually have to type out 2 separate statements here. So I would then say like profit ratio is less than 1, and I'm going to get a band of values here. All of them are less than 1, so let's just maybe change this to 0.3, and you'll see there's my band of values showing up in my visualization. And then I guess the other one is using OR, which is going to say it needs to be either profitable or in this segment. So everything above 0 is going to be blue. And then there should be a few values that are below where the segment is home office. So if I hit apply, you'll notice, sure enough, that OR statement is doing exactly that. That's my 6th tip, is remembering that for an OR statement, you have to have a single argument with another statement, whether it's an or and. You do an argument comparison, and then you use an and or statement, and then you do another comparison, and then you could have as many as you needed to do as many comparisons as possible. Tip 6 out of the way. Let's move on to the next one. We are going to do tip number 7 here. So far we've kind of gone through a bunch of ideas and they haven't all come together. So in tip 7, we're going to start bringing all of it together to build this visualization. Right now what we're looking at is basically 2019 sales is these red or blue lines, and then the gray lines are their 2019 targets based on 2018 data. We're going to rebuild this visualization from scratch. But first, let's start to remove some pieces to get to our starting point. And our starting point is actually just going to be this visualization right here. What we're looking at in this view is just sales for 2019. We already created this calculation in step 1. If you remember, we just said if the year of the order date is equal to 2019, then we want sales, and there is no else statement. So this sort of follows steps number 4 and 5. We're ignoring those values. So let's take a look at actually the 2018 data, because this data actually extends back further than just 2019. And I'm just going to edit this calculation really quick and show you. If I just type in 2018, I've got previous year's data in there. And what I want to do is use this 2018 data to build out 2019 goals. And what we're going to do is we're going to specify more than one then statement. How are we going to do that? An if statement, if you remember, takes an if, it takes a then, it takes an else, and it has an end statement. How are we going to have multiple then statements to basically say, all right, if the central region is here, let's add the target to be 25% higher. If the east is here, let's set their goal to be 10% higher. Well, we can use the else if statement. And we're going to start by just creating a calculated field, and we'll build out each part of this else if statement with 4 separate then statements to create the 2019 goal from the 2018 data. We'll first start by saying if the year of order date is equal to 2018, because if you remember, of all the data we're interested in for the 2019 goal, we actually want to start with the 2018 data. And our region is equal to central. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say, then let's say sales times 1.25. This is ultimately going to give me a goal of 1.25 times more than last year's or 2018 sales for 2019. We would often just say else, null, and then have our end statement. But with this, we actually can use our sort of tack on additional comparisons using else if. So we could just say else if with no spaces. It's a continuation of our original if statement. And we could then say else if year is equal of order date is equal to 2018. And our region is east. Then we're just going to say sales times 1.10. And that's the goal for the east. And what if I do, if I just break this up, it'll be a little bit easier to see. We now have, again, just one if statement, and we're having else if, and it's getting applied an and statement. I'm just going to copy this and make this last part easier. Again, we can just string along multiple else if statements throughout this calculation. So we could just say if the year is 2018 and we're in the south region, let's make our goal 35% higher. And then if we're in the 2018 and the West region, let's make our goal, let's say 15% higher. And if we really wanted to, we could apply an else statement here. You're not going to want to put any values in here because it would apply for all the years outside of 2018. So we're just going to hard code null in here and hit OK. And that's going to create this target calculation. What I'm going to do now is just take that target calculation and place it on columns. And you'll notice that these values, they correspond perfectly with 2018 numbers because when we saved this calculation, we applied the values to 2018. So what I want to do is just come back in here and set this value back to 2019. From there, we can just create a dual axis and synchronize the axes together. And then I'm just going to take this second bar and change the size to be a little bit wider. That's my target bar that I'm making a little bit wider. And let's change the order of these. There's a couple different ways, but I'm just going to kind of swap them the old-fashioned way. And Tableau by default brings measure names onto color. We're going to get rid of that. And we're going to say, all right, let's make that target bar, let's set that to like a light gray. And then we are showing the labels for that. We don't need those either. So now here we go. We can sort of see those values. But what would be nice, even better, is what if we changed the colors to show whether they're above or below the target? And that's what we're going to be able to do. If you remember, because we're using if statements here, we're able to compare 2018 data times some goals to 2019 without any filters on our data. And that's the power of the if statement. So let's create that color. We're just going to create another calculated field. We're going to call it color. And we're going to say if sales 2019, specifically the sum of sales. So we're creating an aggregate in here because that's exactly, if you look up here, we have sum of sales on rows. If it's greater than the sum of our target, then let's say we want it to be above and else, we're going to say below and end. Of course, can't forget that end. And we hit OK. And we'll take that color now. Let's place that out onto our bars of our sales marks card. And we'll just drop it on there. And voila, we have above and below. So we can just change this color to red. Of course, we do some formatting. Let's try that again. We'll change the color to red and blue. And there we have it. We've used our if statements to use aggregates to create the labels. We're comparing 2018 to 2019 data. We're really using the function of if to create our visualization here. Last thing I would do is just hide the header and of course do some formatting. But that's tip number 7 is the use of else if, clearly robust. Plus this example shows all the other examples that we've gone through and all the other tips we've gone through up until now. What we're going to do here is we're going to cut this video. We're going to break it up into 2 parts. In this video, we discussed 7 tips. First, we talked about the basic structure of the if statement, needing 4 parts: the if, then, else, and. Then we talked about how you can deal with aggregates inside of those if statements. If you've got aggregates, every part of it needs to be an aggregate. If you don't, then you have to have everything in line. You can't have a mix of both yet, of course. We'll talk about that in a later tip. In part 3, in tip 3, we discussed how you need to have the same type of data, a string for a string in the if and else statement, or a numeric value for both parts, or a date. But no matter what, they have to be the same. In tip number 4, we talked about how you can ignore the else statement. And then in tip number 5, we actually discussed why you want to use nulls over zeros in the else statement when you want to ignore things. In tip 6, we discussed the and the or. And finally, in the else if, we talked about how you can provide multiple arguments and multiple values for each of those arguments with the else if statement. So that's a wrap on this video. And stay tuned, you can watch part 2 where we go in depth a little bit more with the if statements. Just a reminder, as we're finishing up, please subscribe to our channel. We have plenty of other videos coming out. Make sure you like it if you want to see different content. Also, comment in what you're looking for. We're happy to make additional videos. Also, you can reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn at Tessellation or at Data Coach. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.